What up, suckers? Today we're going to talk about the 5 best decks to take to your local store championship or RCQ. Let's get into it. Number 5, a little bit tricky because it's actually not a deck. Anything other than mono red and its variants. Okay, I have this built. I've played it. I played against it. If you feel like you can win every die roll and you skip through life like most of your life and just draw like the nuts and you're just like that type of person, then go for it. But me personally, I don't want to play a deck that's so dependent on winning die rolls and knowing that I'm going to see a bunch of mirror matches all day and I'm going to have to like either outdraw or outplay my opponent. Like, you may think you're a great Magic player, but so are the other people at your RCQ. Now, this deck is going to make up 20% of the meta, which means if you go to a 30-player RCQ or store championship, you are going to be one of 6 people on some variant like this, and the rest of the field is going to be ready for you. Now, if you want to know how to beat the aggro decks, on the other hand, you're going to have to exile that Screaming Nemesis, and you're also going to have to gain life, or slow them down in a way where you can later play creatures that favorably block against the aggro creatures. So you can play Authority of the Consoles if you're in white, slow them down, gain a little bit of life, save that exile removal for things like Screaming Nemesis, Heartfire Hero, and then block the other creatures, because those things aren't going to deal damage to your face when they die. Now, if you can stabilize against the variants, then you can pretty much take your time from there. But if you're playing against the mono red version, they do have a good burn removal package, so you probably do not want to let them just continuously draw cards, especially if you're like a low life total. In these matchups, if you do not keep a hand with removal, you are probably going to be dead pretty quick. Number 4 deck on my list is going to be your Deir Aggro deck. They have a lot of card draw with things like Enduring Curiosity, Fairy Mastermind. Kaito is also super annoying because of the hexproof. It's going to just come in super cheap, deal a decent amount of damage to your face, and it's going to be hard to deal with after that. So this is a Sunfall temporary lockdown Day of Judgment format, so being able to cast your stuff at instant speed is pretty cool. And then all the other stuff like Deep Cavern Bat and stuff that you're playing earlier can get that removal out of their hands, taking it with a Deep Cavern Bat. Now, when you're playing against this deck, you want to make sure that you take care of the Fairy Masterminds, especially if you're drawing cards with something like Up the Beanstalk. But you also want to make sure that you're taking care of that Enduring Curiosity, because you don't want to just let them draw a bunch of cards. Now, some of these lists do play a Shieldred, so you're going to have to just be wary of like, is that going to be a problem that I'm going to have to deal with later? I know it's like in a lot of sideboards, it's not really in the main deck anymore. It is in like the more control-y versions of the deck, but if you're seeing Spyglass Sirens and stuff like that, then you're probably good for game 1. But kill the Mastermind so that way they're just not drawing cards while you're drawing cards. And then also kill those Enduring Curiosities. Now, the Kaito is going to have hexproof. It's going to be hard to deal with, so if you're in black, Nowhere to Run is really good because it cleans up Fairy Mastermind, and it also cleans up the Enduring Curiosity. It also removes the hexproof from Kaito. You're going to take the damage, but you can just kill it at the end of turn. Another really good card against them if you're in blue is the Stoic Sphinx, if I'm saying that correctly. The ability for that thing to have hexproof is just like really good, so you can essentially just play this thing. None of their flyers can deal with it, so they have no way of removing it as long as you don't play a spell. And you can just turn that thing sideways and just start beating their face for 5 every single turn. My number 3 deck, if you can play fast enough, is the Monoe Control deck. Now, this deck is an almost auto win against any of the aggro decks. You're going to be gaining a lot of life, drawing a ton of cards. You have like the great removal for Elspeth Smites and Sunfalls and temporary lockdowns and Day of Judgments and all kinds of stuff in this deck. You also have like a lot of little weenie creatures that can block until you can get to a point where you can start dealing with these creatures with the spells that cost a little bit more. And the problem with this deck, and I've seen this a lot, is that people can just not finish matches with this deck. You have to think a lot on your opponent's turn. You have to think about playing in advance, like, what am I going to do this turn? What am I going to do next turn? Like, am I supposed to turn the corner now? A lot of people don't understand when to level up their Caretaker's talents. You're not under a lot of pressure. You have like a ton of cards in hand. You don't really need to do anything. Dump the mana into the Caretaker's talent, and then for the rest of the game, you're making 3 3s or possibly even 5 5s. Now, if you're OCD, do not play this deck. People are always like shuffling their cards, making their mana all perfect, tapping their mana, making sure the mana they tap is all perfect, and then they run out of time. Tap your mana, play your cards, say make a fish, your go, and then as they're going, you can go through your little tokens and then put the fish on the battlefield. You don't have to like be like, make a fish, your go. If you do that 20 or 30 times over the course of your match, you're wasting like, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 minutes doing that. If you're like playing with your lands, you're wasting more time doing that. By the time you add up like all these little things, you're so inefficient that you're wasting probably 5 to 10 minutes of actual game time. Now, if you do not practice with this deck, you are going to miss sequence things and you are going to miss triggers. There's just too much to take care of. You have to like be in almost auto mode. If I do this, I can do this, blah, blah, blah. And like, this is what happens when I do this. You need to know this stuff up front before you take it to a decent sized event. Now, just because you can draw a card, just because you can make a thing doesn't mean you should. Another downfall of this deck is people are just decking out. They're just like, oh, make dudes and draw cards and make little 1/1s and block and chump block and draw cards and make chump block. And like all they're doing is just like staying alive and drawing cards. And before they know it, they're out of cards and they have no way of winning the game. Now, if you're up against this deck and you want to beat this deck, you're going to need some enchantment removal. You can't just let them have the Caretaker's Talents and the Enduring Innocences. You don't want to overextend into like a Sunfall, a Day of Judgment, a Temporary Lockdown, anything like that. But at the same time, if you're just like playing an aggro deck and you know this matchup is horrible for you, sometimes you just have to jam and hope they don't have it. It doesn't make sense to pass up a 15% chance of winning the game to just watch that 15% slowly diminish. How am I going to win this game? Is this the only way I'm going to win this game? Sometimes you have to think like that when you're playing an aggro deck against this deck. I am trying to line up an interview with somebody through Skype about this topic, and hopefully that'll be a future video. Number 2, a little bit controversial, but it's going to be Domain with no Zur. So this is based on results based on friends that have been playing the deck. One is playing a no Zur deck. One is playing a combo version, and they've both done really well. 3 store championships combined out of 3. Is that how the math works? Maybe 4. Me and the combo guy split with 1, and then the other guy that is on the no Zur list won 2 in a row. Pretty good. They have also been trying Zur, both of them, and they do not feel like it's an improvement in the deck. The good thing about this deck is almost every card in your deck is like a rare mythic. It's like paid to win Magic in a way, where it's just like every card that you rip off the top is going to be a bomb. Now, I know the online results are going to say that Zur is pretty much everywhere and the Domain non-Zur deck is pretty much nowhere, but I think there's just not a lot of people playing it. Everybody's just kind of sheepish in the Magic community, and they're just playing the Zur list. This is another deck where if you're going to beat it, you're going to need enchantment removal. If you're in blue, negates for the Sunfall, and you're going to try to kill them before the Overlords start coming off of impending. Now, you have a lot of Elspeth Smites and cut downs and stuff like that. That's just not going to get it done against this deck. You might as well just waste those things against the 2/1 insects. And if they're on Zur, then maybe you can kill the Zur. Now, if they have an Overlord in play, do not let them play the Zur and then wait to activate it before you kill the thing, whatever. Just play it while the Zur is on the stack. These decks are going to have a lot of mana. So it's just 3 for the Zur. They're going to go ahead and activate it. They're probably going to have another 2 mana up to activate it again. So like your removal spell is going to do nothing because Hexproof's going to kick in. And then you're just going to be like down a card and facing a Zur and a lifelink, Hexproof, whatever, crazy enchantment creature. And now the number 1 deck on my list, Simic Tempo or Control, whatever you want to call it. Now this is my deck of choice right now. It plays Beans. It plays 1 or 2 mana 5/5s that have like Ward 2 or enter the battlefield, tap down 2 creatures. It utilizes the graveyard almost like a demonic tutor when you get to level up your Storm Chaser's talent and get back basically anything you need in the time. And it gets to play nowhere to run in the sideboard. Now in the early game, all you want to do is use your cantrips, Seed of Hopes, cash grabs, bounce spells, fill up that graveyard, start making your land drops, bounce their stuff so that way you can stay alive and get to like the mid game. Now this is pretty cool because you're crafting your hand and you're holding your opponent off at the same time. Now, when you get to that mid game where you're casting an Eddie Bar Crab for like 2 or 3, maybe even 4, tapping down a couple creatures, and then all of a sudden they're facing down a 5/5 that they have to deal with. That means you can usually tap down the chump blockers and leave them with like a Fairy Mastermind or a Zur or something that they don't want to get rid of. Now, this deck has a lot of lines, so if you like puzzle solving and you like trying to outplay your opponents, this is a really good deck to do that. I also want to mention how broken Storm Chaser's talent is. So you like level up Storm Chaser's talent, get back here, this town ain't big enough, bounce one of their things, bounce your Storm Chaser's talent, play it again, make an otter, level it up, get back here, this town ain't big enough. You see how like annoying this can get? Now that situational removal like cut down, Elspeth Smite, Anoint, stuff like that, that's not going to do very good against your creatures. So in game 1, you're not going to have to worry about beating them down with otters. Now in game 2, they're going to probably bring in some type of graveyard hate to slow down your crabs and your Tolarian terrors. So you're going to want to just go ham on those otters if you possibly can. They're probably boarded out the cut downs and the Elspeth Smites and stuff like that because they didn't think that these otters were going to be a problem. So it's a really good opportunity just to go like super hard on just making otters, bouncing the Storm Chaser's talent, make another otter, prowess triggers, just keep doing that. So you're not going to need multiple Storm Chaser's talents to create multiple otters. A lot of times you can just start bouncing your own stuff, drawing a bunch of cards, then all of a sudden you draw another one, then you level it up, you leave it on 2. You're always making your land drops. Next thing you know, you're leveling it up to level 3, and you're just going to start making a crazy amount of otters as you start casting more instants and sorceries. Now, this deck does reward knowing your matchups, so you can know like, hey, my opponent's probably going to flash in a Fairy Mastermind. I can flash in this Nowhere to Run, kill it. They're going to go to their turn. Now I don't have to worry about hexproof on the Kaido for the rest of the turn. Maybe I need to hold this Nowhere to Run so I can kill the Enduring Curiosity that's going to flash in before they deal damage in combat. So there is like a lot of things that you kind of have to know, but the deck does provide a lot of opportunities for you to play around certain things. But that's it, everybody. That is my 5 decks to take to your local store championship or RCQ. If you don't want to take my advice and you want to bring one of those aggro decks and you think you can skip through life and win all your die rolls, good luck, but I would definitely recommend checking out one of the other 4 decks on my list. Peace.